I have some breaking news coming out of Washington, D.C. about Adam Schiff. New FBI documents that were leaked in the last 24 hours, as well as a call for Hillary Clinton to be investigated by Pam Bondi. To help me go through all this, I have Alex Newman. Alex, thank you for joining me again.
Great to be here. Thank you very much for having me, Stephen.
So just some background for my audience. Alex is an independent journalist, author of Deep State, The Invisible Government Behind the Scenes, and the founder of Liberty Sentinel, a free newsletter. And I'll leave a link down below. Earlier today, President Trump held a press conference about the Kennedy Arts Center, but he was asked about all of this Obamagate, Russiagate, and he asked Pam Bondi specifically, he called her out to go after Hillary Clinton, wants an update on Obama, and specifically targeted Adam Schiff, saying we have to bring these people to justice or else they'll continue to hurt the country. Let's go ahead and listen to this together, and then we'll react to it because it's very interesting.
With them great, actually. We had the Russia. I had to go through the Russia hoax. And it was actually, it was a strain on the relationship. I actually told them, I said, you know, they got this phony investigation going on, Russia, totally phony, created by Adam Schiff, Shifty Schiff, and Hillary Clinton and the whole group of them. And it made it very dangerous for our country because I was unable to really deal with Russia the way we should have been. I'm looking at Pam because I hope something's going to be done about it. These people put our country at great danger. And Adam Schiff, it was all made up. It was a hoax. The Mueller report came out. They all hated me. They had 18 Trump haters, and they said I did nothing wrong. They couldn't believe, they couldn't find anything after years of investigation. It was all a hoax. It was a hoax created by the Democrats, but in particular Schiff and Crooked Hillary, the whole group. And now we've learned all the stuff that's come out over the last 2 months is incredible. Through intelligence, and hopefully something's going to happen with it. These are people that put our country in danger, in real danger. I want to thank you all very much.
We've all been waiting on Pam Bondi. Even the president of the United States is saying, Pam Bondi, I'm looking at you. We have to go after Hillary Clinton. We have to go after Adam Schiff. Your thoughts on this? Because in the comments, I read people saying they're not going to do it. Republicans are all talk, no action. But then I listen to Alex Jones, and he says all of the people that he gets intel from, they say they're going for it. There's going to be big arrests. Your thoughts on what President Trump just said, your thoughts on the whole situation?
Well, thank you, Stephen. I'll start by saying I think Trump is absolutely correct. These people must be not just investigated. Everybody now has access to more than enough evidence to show that there were massive crimes committed here. And not just regular run-of-the-mill crimes. I mean, we're talking about betraying your country, trying to overthrow the democratically elected leader of the country. These are unbelievably serious crimes. Some of the people working at DOJ, I think, are very, very good. I understand Ed Martin is doing some really important work. I know Judge Jeanine Pirro doing some really good work. There's a lot happening. I'm actually working with General Michael Flynn right now on a cover story for the New American Magazine about this. He was, of course, the first one who was taken out by the Russia collusion hoax. And he has been advocating for a long time for arrests and prosecutions. Trump now has done it. And he's come out and said directly that Obama was the ringleader here. He's absolutely correct. So earlier today, I was talking to Roger Stone, and he expressed doubt that Obama could be held accountable. I mean, he didn't say no, but because presidents have pretty wide immunity in the scope of what they're doing as president, it'll be a little bit harder to go after Barack Obama. But when I heard Trump talking about Hillary Clinton, Trump knows that the Clintons are involved in every kind of shady activity, whether it be the Epstein scandal, whether it be, and Trump has posted about this on Truth Social, the Clinton body count where people mysteriously end up dead. Trump knows all of this, so I'm very hopeful that the DOJ will do something. Obviously, it needs to be a process. We don't want it to look politicized. We don't want it to look improper. There needs to be a proper investigation followed by the appropriate procedure. But like Trump said, it is absolutely essential that this happens. And just because they're big names and they've been involved in politics, that should not shield them from accountability for these massive crimes.
Well, he admitted that he wanted to go after Hillary Clinton, but he felt like for the good of the country, it wouldn't look good to lock up a former president's wife. Now he says he regrets that. It would have been the right thing. And you look at people like James Clapper, who they were involved in the weapons of mass destruction lie, the 2016 Russia hoax, the Hunter Biden laptop, the 2020 election, lies going into the 2024 election. I just feel like if these people aren't held accountable, they're going to continue to commit crimes. I also read, this is out, Catherine Herridge, award-winning former CBS anchor. She's been doing a lot of work as well as others, but there's new documents out just in the last 24 hours. And these are FBI letterhead documents that have come out that are basically saying that Adam Schiff, as President Trump just said right there at that press conference this morning, Adam Schiff was one of the main people promoting this. So this new FBI sheet that was leaked in the last 24 hours shows that they were purposely leaking information to the press. Those around Adam Schiff were pressured to go along with this behavior. According to this document, everything was run through Adam Schiff. Mm-hmm. So everything had to go up through him. And then he and a group would decide who they would leak to, what they would leak, the information that they would put out in order to get Donald Trump. I'm just thinking, even outside of the mortgage fraud allegations against him, Adam Schiff is going down because from what I was reading last night before I left the office, his auto pen pardon from Joe Biden, while he wasn't even in Washington, D.C., specifically says the January 6th situation. What are your thoughts on this new FBI document coming out saying everything flowed through Adam Schiff? He made all the decisions on what was leaked and to whom.
Yeah, I think it's very clear that Adam Schiff is a critical player in this whole, what has been called now a treasonous conspiracy by the Director of National Intelligence. I think the terminology is absolutely correct. So when you're a key player in a treasonous conspiracy, that is a monumental crime. Yes, he was involved in the leaking. Yes, he was involved in directing this conspiracy. Certainly not the only one. Swalwell was a critical person here. We know at the highest levels of the FBI now, some of these new revelations show that even James Comey and some of their top level people were involved in directing their staffs to work with the fake media to publicize these information, things that were being leaked. So we have here one of the biggest crimes ever in the history of the United States. And clearly these so-called pardons that Joe Biden did not even sign are not legitimate. I mean, you cannot issue a blanket pardon for criminal charges yet to be determined. You cannot have an auto pen sign when the president's not even aware of it. So I know there are very smart lawyers looking at this, but for me, it looks totally ridiculous. The idea that you can have a pardon from an auto pen for very unspecific charges yet to come, covering a huge area of time. I mean, it's just so outrageous. So I think Schiff, if there's justice, and I'm hopeful that we will see it, he is going to end up in an orange jumpsuit in a federal prison, and many others as well. And if they don't, we've got even bigger problems, I think, than any of us realize, Stephen.
Yeah, absolutely, we do. Okay, you study the United Nations. I want to go through a story with you about how the United Nations, NGOs, and the Democrats teamed up to overthrow the United States, invade us with illegals from third world countries. But you've been doing some research. There's like a new international court ruling where they're trying to control us through carbon. We're made of carbon. Carbon comes out of us. Like it's like the number one control mechanism that these evil elites have come up with. What is the situation with the UN and controlling us through carbon?
Yeah, this should have been on the front page of every newspaper in the United States, Stephen. It is one of the biggest stories maybe ever. So you have, for a little background here, because people don't really know how the UN works, the UN has kind of a pseudo-judicial branch. And one of the main institutions in that is called the International Court of Justice. They like to refer to it as the World Court or the World Supreme Court. And during the Biden administration, the World Supreme Court, as they like to imagine it, took a very important case. The case involved climate change, and it was supposed to determine, allegedly, the legal obligations of states or of governments with respect to climate change. And so Joe Biden sent a prominent lawyer from the State Department, allegedly to represent the United States at this thing. So I was writing about this when it was going on. Almost nobody in the American media was covering it. But just a week or maybe 2 weeks ago now, the ruling finally came out. And what they found is absolutely astounding, Stephen. Essentially, they said, and it was a 500-page ruling, so we don't have to get into all the nitty-gritty, but the essence of the decision was that every government in the world has what they call a legal duty to combat climate change by reducing emissions of CO2, which, as you just pointed out, that's the gas we exhale. Every single human activity results in CO2 emissions. CO2 makes up a fraction of 1% of all the greenhouse gases naturally in the atmosphere. But every government, they said, has a legal obligation under international law to combat CO2 and climate change. They said failure to do so constitutes, in their terminology, an internationally wrongful act, which essentially means they're laying the groundwork here for future prosecutions of people like President Trump who do not play along with this whole agenda. Very, very dangerous. And it gets crazier from there. They also tried to claim that you have a human right to a good climate. And if a government is not with sufficient vigor combating human emissions of CO2, they're depriving people of the world of their human rights, which is a very serious crime. And before people laugh and say, oh, UN court, what are they going to do to us? I just want to remind people of a few things, right? The president of the Philippines only came across my desk one time. I only wrote one article about him during his administration. His name was Rodrigo Duterte. And the reason he came across my desk was because he said the UN is evil and we ought to leave. The Philippines shouldn't be a member of the UN anymore. Well, right now, as we speak, he's sitting in a jail cell in The Hague waiting to go on trial at the UN's International Criminal Kangaroo Court. This is a very powerful institution. Now, they're also going after Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel. They are saying that he is committing human rights violations. And I want to point this out here. Regardless of what somebody thinks about Israel or Netanyahu or any of these things, the state of Israel has never even signed up for the International Criminal Court. They never approved the Rome Statute, putting themselves under the jurisdiction of this UN court. The same UN court is trying to prosecute American soldiers. The United States has never agreed to the jurisdiction of this court. So you now have an international rogue court system with judges, many of whom were trained by communist dictatorships, Islamist dictatorships, claiming Donald Trump and every other government in the world must combat CO2. And if they don't, they're violating people's human rights. You don't have to be a dot connector to see where this is going. They are going to try to go after anyone who resists this climate agenda, potentially with criminal prosecutions, and they've already established the precedent to make it all happen.
If you're 64 or older, you need to hear this. Between Medicare scams, corrupt agents, and bloated insurance companies, it's too easy to make costly Medicare mistakes. That's why I've partnered with Chapter, a trusted Medicare team that's helping seniors fight back. They were founded by folks who watched their own parents get misled and decided enough was enough. Chapter is different. They actually listen. They search every plan nationwide to find the one that saves you the most, not the one that makes them the most. People are relieved when they talk to Chapter. Kathleen said Chapter not only explained everything, unlike several other agents, but also saved her hundreds. Jane's saving more than $1,000 a year by switching her Medicare supplement plan. Lower price, same coverage. They're honest, they don't pressure you, and their help is completely free. So if you're turning 65 soon or already on Medicare, don't let the system take advantage of you. Call Chapter today at 435-288-0593. Most people say they wish they had called them sooner. So crazy that they could try to control us for being made of carbon or driving too many miles or breathing too much. It's just so messed up. Speaking of the United Nations, Mike Howell from the Oversight Project testified that Democrats teamed up with the United Nations and NGOs to overthrow the United States. They wanted to level the playing field, so make us closer to a second and third world country. Well, how do they do that? They flood us with uneducated, unskilled poor people from third world countries. Let me go ahead and just share that with you, and then we'll react to it together.
I now recognize Mr. Mike Howell for 5 minutes for his opening statement.
Members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify about the role of NGOs, or non-governmental organizations, in facilitating mass illegal immigration. I currently serve as the executive director of the Oversight projects, and previously was at DHS and on Capitol Hill conducting oversight of immigration matters. The United States of America is still reeling from the worst border invasion in its history. This was an invasion that was planned, promoted, encouraged, funded, and sustained by radical elements of the previous administration. But this invasion could not have been accomplished without a colossal partnership with the NGO community. Simply put, the government just did not have the capacity to get this many people in and around the country without the support of the nonprofits. And to that end, they gave them almost $6 billion to a conglomerate of UN agencies and over 200 NGOs to do just that, according to statistics from the Center for Immigration Studies. The result was that Border Patrol became a daycare. They became Uber drivers just to shuttle illegals to the nonprofits to get them around the country. Now, the Oversight Project has led the way in exposing what I call this border industrial complex. In December of 2022, we did the first of its kind study where we tracked illegal aliens by their cell phones as they went through these nonprofits at the border. In just a 1-month period, in tracking 30,000 devices, so a very small subset of the 10 million that Biden had crossed the border, we found out that the illegals went to nearly every single congressional district in the United States. We proved that every town was indeed a border town.
The United Nations, the NGOs. Do you remember when President Trump asked for $5 billion to build the wall along the southern border? And
Yep.
They said, you cannot have that kind of money. That is such a ridiculously large amount of money. Now we find out that Democrats, through USAID and these NGOs, they gave out $6 billion. They worked with these NGOs. They worked with the United Nations. They literally had a conveyor belt of humans flooding into the United States. Gratefully, President Trump has been able to shut all of that down. Why is the United Nations so against the United States? Is it jealousy? Is it the fact that they want global control and we are the last beacon of hope? What are your thoughts on that?
There's so much to say on this, Stephen. It's a story I've been following almost my entire career in journalism. And it's one of the few subjects that I have 2 chapters in my book on the deep state about, because it's so essential to understand what they've been doing with mass migration. I'll start off by saying, I've lived almost all my life as an immigrant. I grew up in 8 countries on 4 continents. I'm married to a legal immigrant. So no animus here against immigrants. But what is going on here has nothing to do with compassion. It has nothing to do with economics. It is an effort to completely undermine, first of all, the nation state, and second of all, what used to be known as Christendom or the free world. And it's very clear that this is happening, and we have statements from the highest levels of the United Nations to that effect. I'll give you one clear example. The UN's czar for migration. His name was Peter Sutherland. He's passed away now. He's a big Goldman Sachs executive before moving over to become the UN's immigration czar, said publicly in an interview with the UN's own news service that what we're doing here is undermining national homogeneity for the purpose of undermining national sovereignty. He said, we got to get over these ideas, these old shibboleths, he said, of borders and the historic images of our own country. And I can tell you where it's all going. Western Europe really gives you a sneak preview. And this will come to America if we're not careful. If you look at all the big cities across Western Europe today, Amsterdam, the Dutch are in the minority. Frankfurt, the Germans are in the minority. London, the Brits are in the minority. Malmo, the Swedes are in the minority. I mean, this is happening all throughout Europe. If you look at Brussels, the capital of the European Union, only about 25% of the population of that city is actually Belgian. It's unbelievable what has happened there. And so the idea is you flood these countries with enough foreigners from all different places, with all different languages, all different backgrounds, all different cultures. And pretty soon people wake up and say, why do we have these arbitrary lines on a map? I don't have anything in common with the people around me. We don't speak the same language. We don't like the same things, and we have nothing to do with each other. Why don't we just get rid of them? And then, of course, the de-Christianization process. I watched that so clearly happen when I was living in Sweden, which is where my wife is from. The more Muslim immigrants came in. The government was literally flying airplanes to Africa and the Middle East and bringing them in, just like they were doing here with help from the United Nations under the guise of refugee. What happened was they said, well, we got the lesbian bishop of the Church of Sweden actually said, we got to take the crosses off the churches so that we don't offend the new Swedes. They can't have Christmas markets anymore. Now they just have winter markets because they don't want to offend. So these societies are being de-Christianized at an incredible pace. The nation state is being undermined. And I've spoken with very senior leaders in Europe. I was in Budapest in 2018, went to go visit the prime minister's office and did a 30-minute interview with their secretary of state where he said what they're doing here is they're undermining our Christian culture and they're undermining the concept of nation states to pave the way for a globalist, non-Christian world order. And when people understand it in that sense, everything makes sense. Tom Homan told me they want more Democrats in sanctuary states so they can get more congressional representation. It's true. The big companies want cheaper labor. It's true. A lot of the useful idiots have been convinced that they're doing something humanitarian. It's true. But the big picture here, this is about moving the world toward a one world system and undermining nation states and what used to be known as Christendom.
Wow, that's scary to me because when I read the autobiography on Bonhoeffer in Germany, he said one of the first things that he noticed was that they made the Christian churches next to Jesus, they had to have Adolf Hitler. So you had to have the Führer and the Messiah next to each other. Over time, they removed Jesus and it was just the Führer. It was just the government became the religion of Germany. So when you say that, oh, we've got to take down the Christian crosses, we can't have anything Christian. I mean, I see this around the world where they're removing Christmas because they might offend Islamic children, but then those children are being forced to go through Ramadan and fasting so that a hungry fasting Islamic child isn't jealous of a Caucasian Christian who can eat whatever they want that day. Very, very scary. Okay, I know we have limited time. I'm going to skip one story and go to the last story with you. George Soros, he's going to be forced to testify about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. But now, just today, I'm reading that there's these protests that are going on in Washington, D.C., with President Trump trying to clean up the crime. And now they're following the paper trail, the money trail. George Soros and his group have injected $20 million into fake protesters in order to embarrass Trump, bring him down. How come he's being called in about Jeffrey Epstein, but he's never called in about funding the invasion of America, all of the violent protests? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, George Soros, I think the only reason he's been safe this long is that he can afford an army of attorneys to keep him safe. One of my colleagues, William F. Jasper, actually published an excellent cover story in the New American Magazine where he went through a whole list of criminal statutes at the state and federal level that George Soros is clearly in violation of, very much including funding and supporting riots and violent demonstrations. And this is not new. Last year, he was in the news because he was funding these pro-Hamas riots that we saw on a lot of college campuses. What you have here is a guy who is, by the way, deeply connected to other elements of the deep state. He's not just a lone nut, a lone actor. He is working very closely, very carefully with very powerful people, including some that you don't see regularly in the news. And his goal, very clearly, is a new world order. He says it regularly. I've got interviews where he's publicly saying we need a new world order, and the new world order should be owned, he said in an interview with the Financial Times, by communist China. In fact, in a related interview that he did a year before, he said that communist China had a better functioning government and a better economy than the United States of America. This is right in line with things that like David Rockefeller has said. David Rockefeller's legacy is funding these very kinds of subversive movements. When you follow the money trail, you find a coordinated effort at not protest, but bringing down the United States of America. It's exactly what Rich Higgins, the director of policy and planning on the National Security Council during Trump's first term, explained was a coordinated effort, an alliance of Islamists, globalists, communists, and socialists to destroy the United States of America, not just as a nation, but even as an ideal. That's what George Soros is involved here. Yes, he should be explaining himself when it comes to Epstein. He also should be explaining himself when it comes to funding all of these subversive groups and movements. And he also should be explaining himself when it comes to insider trading. He's already been convicted by a French court of insider trading. This guy's not just some kind of genius businessman. He's relying on inside knowledge to build up his fortune that he now plans to hand off to the even more radical Alex Soros. So we need answers. This guy needs to be brought in under oath and questioned. And frankly, I think it's way past time for criminal investigations.
All right. Well, hopefully Congress will have the courage to ask him questions while he's sitting there with his team of lawyers, and we can get some answers. Alex, thank you so much. You do a lot of research. You fly all over the world. It's why I like having you on. I'm going to put a direct link to your Twitter as well as Liberty Sentinel so people can check out that free newsletter. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much, Stephen.